Garde by Alternative Armies, a dueling game that takes place in the world of Flintlock, a fantasy Napoleonics realm. If you are playing something like Silver Bayonet, you should really go look at the Alternative Armies line for Flintlock. It's got some great figures, and as you can see, these are elves wearing, red coats versus kind of bicorns. There's an elvish civil war going on, and they've set aside their constant desire for stealing human babies to make changelings, and they are now fighting a civil war. I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to be using two different figures. This fella in red, in the McDonald's colors, is Monsieur Jude de Guerre. He's got the cross on his chest because he is a servant of God. Of course, he is one of Richelieu's guards. Both of these figures come from Blue Moon Manufacturing. You can get them at Old Glory. And then the guy here with is a Pimpernel a mask, or is that the belt? I can never remember. But the guy in the red mask and the blue, he's going to be using the blue dice. He has a rapier, and your weapons determine where you can attack. Mr. Longsword can attack this square, and this square, the two directly ahead, and then one just to the left. The rapier can attack the square in front, and then these two squares, kind of the one diagonal to the right and one two up to the right. So there may come a time where one of these guys can attack. With this kind of setup, the man in blue can only attack these three squares. He doesn't get an attack. So movement is very important, and movement occurs in the order of the dice for the action pool that you've taken. I've thought about this for all of 5 minutes, and how are we going to play this solo? And the answer is I don't really think we are. We'll set up a little scenario where our two warriors are going to start 4 squares apart, and we're in the middle of a town square here. The seconds are standing by. We've cleared the furniture, and we're ready to roll. The guy with the long sword is much stronger. He's got a lot more of the big 20-sided dice. But there's one thing I'm a little confused on. If you look at the way movement works, when you select a D20, that is your signaling. I'm going to rush ahead 3 squares. With a D12, that is your signal that I am merely going to turn in place. With a D10, I am going to move forward 1 or 2, and I will decide that at the time of my movement. On a D8, I am going to shuffle to the left or the right 1 square. I will decide that when I move. And with a D6, I am going to withdraw by 1 square. You may want to do that. Bear in mind that on any given turn, the most moves you can take before you say, you know what, I'm not moving at all, is, well, it depends what kind of armor you're wearing. Neither of these guys is wearing armor, so they have a base move of 6 squares. Monsieur Cruller in the blue is very fast. He's got a move bonus of 3. He can move 9 squares before he needs to take a breath. Monsieur de Juguer, he's only got a speed of 1. He can only move 7 squares. So exhausting your enemy, even if none of you lands a blow, is an option. But here's the real question. How do we set up an AI for this? And I don't know how you do that. The game itself is a 2-player game where you select which die you want. Do you want to go with a strong attack that takes a long time to develop, or a weak attack that happens very quickly? Don't show your opponent your dice pool. Don't show them your dice until they're revealed at the same time. Now, I could set up a simple AI. I could randomize which options are available and have the guy in blue pick one of those. But that's going to lead to, and take my word for it, I did a test video. I did a little test run. It's going to lead to this guy just moving around at random and me trying to chase him down. I don't think that would make for a very interesting experience or a fun game. So we're going to try to just, on turn 1, we may cheat a little bit in favor of red. On turn 2, a little bit in favor of blue. But honestly, you can kind of sit down and role play this out. Our strong guy really wants to get locked into combat, so he's going to use his D10. But there's something weird going on here. I think that if you want to do an all-out attack, you shouldn't be required to move 3 squares to do that. Maybe you do. Maybe that charge is fundamental. But I suspect that there's something I'm missing that says you can opt for any of the dice below you. In other words, with a D8, when it's your turn to move, you can either move one to the side or one back. There's nothing that will allow you to move two back, so you can't take that as an option. With the D20, the same thing holds true. You can opt to do anything. Move forward 1, 2, or 3, 1, 2, or 3, sidestep, or step back. Or just stand in place. Now, every 90 degrees you turn counts as one square of movement for the purposes of getting tired. When you get to your last, so let's suppose that I've already moved 5 squares, and I have selected the D20. I want to charge ahead. I can only move 1, 2. My turn is done. Now on the next turn, my action die is automatically a D6. That will be used for determining how fast I move. Oh, well, I don't move. This guy will make his move. We'll do our fighting. Now, if I get to attack him, I have to use this die. But if I survive this turn, then the D6, it's not part of my dice pool, so it just goes back into my dice pool is one way to look at it. Or if you don't have any D6s in your dice pool, just roll a D6 for this one time. And now your movement resets. So you can move another 7 squares, basically. So let's think about this from the perspective of Monsieur Cruller, who can only attack these 3 squares. He says, I think I need to start off by sidestepping. He's going to use the D8. Meanwhile, our strong guy loves this because he can attack. And he says, well, if I move 2, I won't be able to attack this turn. So instead, I'm going to do that. We'll just use the D10. I'll advance 2 squares to see what happens. Now, the D8 goes first. So if we were playing a 2-player game, we would reveal, and oh, look, the D8 goes first. He says, I want to move to here because that will allow me to attack like this. And then this guy goes forward the 2 squares. So I will record this over on the little character sheet that I've got right next door where you can see it. Monsieur Cruller has 8 squares of movement left. And Monsieur de Juguer only has 5 because he moved up 2. Nobody is in position to attack. They're too far away. So we repeat the process. And once again, Mr. Rapier says, I want to shuffle over here. Well, again, we're going to use the D8 and the D10. Monsieur thinking that we're just going to lock horns, our tough guy goes, yeah, I'm just going to advance 2. So we go, oh, I can move to there. Now we leave the die there because that will be used for attacks. Oh, now this gets a little interesting because our long swordsman, if he moves to here, just the 1 square, I think that's where we want to go. He says, I'm good with that because any one of these, either of these 2 squares, we're going to be locked in combat. But at least this way, I can attack him back. The longsword's attack, oh, wait a minute, it's not. Mr. Longsword is going to move to here because his attack sequence looks like, moving back to here, he can attack this square, and this square. So we'll move him to here, and maybe on the next turn, we can get ourselves into position to attack our opponent. This is unfortunate because not only does that put him down to, let's see, he was at 2, he's at 4 squares moved, he's only got 3 left. It means that Monsieur Cruller gets to make an attack, and he doesn't get to return. The rapier moves in an L shape like this. He's in position. Monsieur Cruller rolls this die. On a 5 or better, he will hit. With a result of a 7, that's a hit. We have one special ability here. He says, I'm super tough. I am going to fight a defensive fight. I get 1 free save on a 5 or better. We roll an 8, and that hit does not land after all. Or does it? That only applies if a wounding hit has occurred. The guy with the rapier has successfully struck. He rolls to find out his damage. He only does 3 points of damage, which is no effect. Both of these weapons have a maximum damage of 16 and 17. If you roll higher than that, you also have no effect. Not going to be an issue. Can't roll higher than a 16 on a d8. That does end our turn of combat, and both combatants can turn. In this case, and they turn in the order of these. Our rapier-wielding fella is happy with where he's at. He's going to stay, and that turn counts as one more turn, one more square of movement. So we move on. With the 3 doing no damage does not remove the die. It's only on the attack roll. So we have to guess, what are we going to move again? Well, of course, he wants to sidestep Monsieur Drew de Guerre because, again, he's only attacking these 3 squares in an effort to get him into a position where he can be attacked. On the other hand, he says, oh, you know what? I want to be able to attack back. So if you're going to slide over to there, I'm just going to hold my ground with a d12. Or do we charge ahead and force Monsieur de Guerre to chase us down? In this case, I think we go ahead and choose the d12. We'll just spin to face, and we'll be 1 off of each other. I mean, ideally, what we would want to do is spin, because then maybe we back off, and we get another attack. In fact, the other thing you could do is turn, and if we really want to do this go first, we could turn at the end of the combat, and on the next turn, back off 1 square. But for now, let's just leave it as is. We'll just go with what we were doing. This is the tavern in the background, by the way. We may need to move these bushes back just a little bit. The D8 goes first. He says, I want to move to here. And then the D12 says, well, I'll go here. And now the D8 gets to make his attack. He needs a 5 or better with his longsword because they're both in each other's like firing arc, if you want to think of it that way. He gets to go first. Oh, but you know what I forgot on the last turn? You have to choose your... And here's where I think we just choose our defense randomly. You have multiple attack options. Monsieur Coulaire, in the blue, cannot hack. And that's largely because he has a rapier. You can't hack with a rapier. So we choose, he says, you know what? And we should have done this last time. Last time he just did cut and thrust. The other guy, let's just assume the boy in red, he guessed wrong. So what we're going to do is we'll pick the attack routine, and then we'll draw a random chit to see what the defense was. In this case, I have 6 of them, or alternatively, we can roll a d6. And anything but a 5 will re-roll. Except that Monsieur de Guerre does not have lunge or disarm. So there's only 4 options here. He says, you know what? I'm just going to make 2 attacks. Both at -1 to hit. Both at -1 to damage. But I'm going to attack 2 times. I'm so confident that you know what? The D8, that's terrible. Let's not do that. He's going to slash. It's +1 to damage. And if he scores a wound, his opponent is pushed back 1 square, which might save him because his opponent won't get to reattack. Now, in the case of a friendly game, both players know that slash would result in a pushback and would be the best option. So the guy in red might not choose that option because the way this works is I secretly choose my attack. And in this case, I will use a die type. So, well, the slash was at a 4. So I put the die down and I cover it up. And your opponent on the defense says, I'm going to defend 4. Obviously, you're doing 4, duh. And then you reveal and go, oh, yeah, I was doing 4. So that's a successful defense. Has nothing to do with the dice. If you can outguess your opponent, you're going to do great. In this case, we can use a random number generator to decide what the defense is. But we'll play it straight, right? Okay, I know that 4 is the most likely, so instead, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut and thrust. Just a basic attack. Does our opponent know that? Well, of all of the options that we have, it's going to be, we'll roll a d6. And on a 2 or a 6, we will re-roll. So, yeah, we re-roll. And he says, I chose to defend against cut and thrust. And remember, we said we were cut and thrust. That is a successful defense, thanks to the random number generator. And the die goes back into the pool. Now, the guy in blue gets to go. And he does the same thing. He says, you know what? I am going to do... Well, I got a D12. I like this. Flurry would be the best. So we're not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to lunge with a -1 to hit. I know there's no chance that you guess lunge. We'll roll a d6, and if we get a 5, which is the only thing you can't do, we'll re-roll. We get a 1, so we guessed a flurry. Oh, but it was a lunge. We're at -1 to hit. We're going to roll the d12, and we need to get a 5 or better, but we also have a -1. So we get a 1. That is a miss, and this die goes out of the pool. He can no longer use his d12 to pivot in place. That is the end of the combat. These duelists could turn if they wanted to. And again, I'm assuming they turn in the order of the dice that they were using. So he declares first. Or does he decide second? I think he gets to either declare first or force his opponent to declare. He says, I want to know what you're doing. I'm not turning. All right, well, I'm not turning. Now, red obviously says, I'm going to go ahead and back off. If I step back 1, I've got the attack, and he does not. And he says, I'm anticipating that you're going to step back, so I will choose the d10. The 6 goes first. He falls back. He says, I'll move forward 1, and that means that we are at 6 squares for red, and we are at 2 squares. Wait, 1, 2. No, we're at 3 squares for blue. Green gets to go first on his attack. He says, this time I am going to cut and thrust once again. We'll roll to see what the defense is. And if it's a 3, it's a successful defense. He says, I'm going to, I can't hack, I'm going to slash. +1 to damage, and I move you back. So we roll, and on a 5 we re-roll. We've defended against a 3, which means the attack strikes home. This is not a successful attack. It strikes home with a d10. The slash is first of all, we roll to see if we hit, and with a 4, it's a miss. That die goes out of the pool. And again, on the next turn, he says, I fall back 1. His opponent says, I am going to sidestep for reasons which will become clear shortly. Movement, he goes first, he goes second, and sidesteps to here. Uh-oh, George, this is a problem for the guy with the longsword because the rapier has an attack. He does not, even though he has the d6, he can't make the attack. That is his last move on the next turn. Even worse, he can't move next turn. He has to spend the whole turn standing still. He's going to take another attack. Remember, he attacks these 3 squares. With this result, I just thought of something. Okay, so with this result, he gets to make his attack, but we have to do the same thing where he says, I'm going to go ahead and do the lunge. There's no way he would ever... No, I'm going to do flurry. He says, I'm going to make a flurry of attacks. I think I can take him. That would be dumb. He says, well, I'm going to guess anything but a 5, we re-roll. And so a 6. He says, I thought you were going to try to disarm me. Well, he didn't, so that defense doesn't work. We now make 2 attacks at -1 to hit. We're looking for a 6, 7, or 8. We get an 8, that is a successful hit, and we get a 4, that is a miss. I don't know if that die goes away. Now, normally, you would do your first attack, your opponent gets his counterattack, and then you do your second attack. But because he went second, I think we're safe to just roll them both. And also, because our opponent can't attack, we just roll them both. We're fine. So we got 1 successful hit. The d8 is going to go bye-bye, but we have to find out how much damage we do. And for this, because we did flurry, we are at -1 to damage. We roll the d8. We got 0. That did no damage. So the fight continues. And in this case, this fella says, the guy in red says, I've already used all of my movement. So he has to hold with a d6. This is not part of his dice pool. That's all he can use. Guy with the rapier is happy where he is. He says, I will use a... Oh, no. Oh, I do have a d12. He says, I'm obviously going to use a d12. So the d6 gets to go first. He does not have an attack. The D12 gets to go, and let me use one that's a little easier to see on camera. The D12 says, I will attack with, in this case, why don't we do a slash? +1 to damage, opponent is moved back 1 square. So, he's going to defend against a disarm. Hoping to win, it didn't work. So we're going to roll. And this time, our damage is, and with a slash, we're at +1. A 3 + 1 is a 4. That still has no effect. The fight continues. Both of our players want to sidestep. He's hoping to get into position. He is hoping to keep their current position. Neither of them moved. They're both back to their maximum allowable movement. 7 squares in his case, 9 in his. The question then becomes, who goes first? And to determine that, we make a reflex check. We roll both of these. We add 2 to the red guy's score, and we add a total of 5 to the blue guy. He has a reflex score that is 2 higher, plus he is using a light weapon. The rapier gives him a +1 on this roll. Blue rolls a 7, green rolls a 2, and that means Monsieur Cruller gets to decide who moves first. Of course, he says, I want to see where you're going. Oh, you think you can hit me that easy? I don't think so. They are both back to 1. They've both moved 1 square now. And once again, Monsieur Cruller has an attack with his rapier, and Mr. Longsword, attacking these 3 squares, does not. So we have to decide, what is our attack option going to be? I think we just cut and thrust. Let's see what the defense die says. I'll defend against the lunge. Well, that didn't work. So our cut and thrust is going to see if we hit. We get a 4, which is a miss, and the D8 goes bye-bye. The fact that he cannot hit the broadside of a barn means that Monsieur Cruller is down to just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dice. If he misses 6 more times, he will be fatigued, and he will have... Oh, get rid of that D4. That doesn't do anything. He's actually down to 6 dice. Once he's down to that last die, he is fatigued, and he is going to... I think he loses the battle automatically. The technical term for which is he yields. Unfortunately for Monsieur Cruller, he no longer has the D8. He can't match sidestep for sidestep. He says, well, if that's the case, I know he's going to sidestep. He's trying to get me here. Maybe I will go ahead and I'll just eat it. I think I need that D12 in order to win this match. The dice are revealed. Mr. Longsword is now in position to attack. Mr. Rapier has the better odds of hitting, but he's got to wait because the D8 attack gets off first. We will choose to conduct an attack with a slash, which will do +1 to damage. That is a 4. And for the defensive dice, we roll a 3 for defense. We didn't outguess him, so he gets to make his attack roll. His attack roll is a 1. He misses. Now he loses his second die. And we're actually down to 5 over here. I forgot this defense die isn't one of the action dice. Because he succeeded, because he's still alive, Monsieur Cruller now gets to roll his D12 for his own attack. And wait, that's not the attack roll because we have to go through the whole sequence, don't we? He is going to opt to stand and attack. He says, I'm happy with just whatever. His opponent says, well, let's see if I roll a 3. No, I thought you were going to use a flurry of blows, which means we can make the attack roll. The attack roll comes up with an 8. A cut and thrust has no modifiers, so we check to see what the wound status is, and this time we roll an 8. When you roll 8, that means that you do a total of 1 damage. 5 to 10 is 1 wound. But Monsieur de Juguer bought a little feature that says, I'm really tough. I get to make 1 saving throw. Now, you can only do this once per turn. but he's going to eat the wound, and it won't count as a wound on a 5 or better. With a 7, it works, but that's the last he can do of that. That will end the turn. It doesn't count as a wound. We haven't had first blood yet. He is at 2 squares moved, and now we have to decide what are we going to do. And I think let's go ahead and boy, we don't. Do we stand our ground and risk? Yeah, we're going to stand our ground, and we're going to risk this guy sidestepping. In fact, he does. He says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sidestep over here so I can attack Mr. Blue, and he can't counterattack. Oh boy, Mr. Blue says, well, maybe maybe I should have picked a better, maybe I should have charged forward. His only options at this point are moving forward 3 squares, moving back 1, waiting for this, and then turning. Maybe on the next turn he can, I'm not quite sure. I need to think about how this works a little bit more. Be that as it may, here's where we're at. And at the end of movement for this turn, and maybe we go here and withdraw, but turning is awkward when you don't have that D12 in your dice pool. Man, or advancing is, man, maybe we got to back off. Well, we'll worry about that. He used the 12, so he's going to turn. So maybe he needs to move the D6 because that allows him to withdraw. But I already did the 12, so we're going to stick with what we chose. I'm learning as we go. That means that the D8 gets to go on the attack, and the D8 says I'm just going to do my regular, normal. No, let's go big. Let's go big or go home. We want that +1 to damage. Because we need to be able to roll that. So we're going to go with the full slash, and that is a 4. Defender is defending against a 1, which would be a flurry. He thought it was going to be a double attack. Nope. So we roll, and we get a 7, so that is a successful hit. Monsieur Crullaire does not have that saving throw. So we roll for damage, and because we did a slash, we are at +1 to the damage. With an 8, we do our first wound. We push him back 1 square, and that is first blood. The duel is over. Monsieur de Jeu de Guerre, he is going to gain 3 reputation. 1 because he fought, 1 because he's unarmored, and 1 because he won the duel. So his honor goes up by 3, his reputation is 3, and his opponent will have his honor go, I believe it goes to 3 as well. Because you get 1 for fighting, 1 for not having armor, and 1 because your opponent is stronger, even though those D20s didn't come into effect because there wasn't any point in charging. Which, again, I still kind of think that you should be allowed to choose any of the movement directions from your die type or later. Because you waited longer, you have more options available. Maybe we'll play it that way. Maybe I'll ask the author of the game on social media for a little bit of clarity. I already asked him a dumb question to which you helped me find the answer, but hey, as they say, there's no dumb questions, there's only dumb people asking questions. And I am maybe not the greatest, but certainly not the least. Thanks for exploring. This was a lot longer than I expected. I thought this would be a quick 5 to 10 minute game. I don't know if it's because Monsieur Crullaire was just swinging and miff. Man, he was just whiffing on everything, man. Or if it's just because I'm one guy trying to play both sides. I think this would go a lot faster as a 2-player game. We'll find out in the future. Hopefully, someday I'll get to play this against a real live boy. But until then, I'm just going to keep showing you all the fun stuff, and we'll take a look at maybe a pistol duel in the next iteration of this playthrough of Garde. Kind of a fun little dueling game. The best one I've ever played. I mean, it's definitely one of the top 2. Hey, until next time, I'm praying for you.